Hey guys, welcome to Nobleman Sailing Media's YouTube channel. Today we are going to talk about which drone you should buy if you are sailing or over the water doing boating in some way. But first, let's check out some epic footage that I've captured over the last couple of years. That was some footage from all around the world, including Antarctica, which is an interesting story as far as how I got permission to fly down there, but that's for another video. For now and today, we're gonna talk about the different drones that I have here in front of me, what are the pros and cons of each of those, why you might wanna buy one versus another one. I'm also gonna go over some settings in these drones that will help you prevent yourself from crashing your drone into your boat or crashing it as you're trying to land it on a boat, and also make sure that it doesn't fly away and then you lose it that way. And last but not least, we're also going to do or talk about this MAVIC Mini, which is my giveaway. One of my 1,000 subscribers, first 1,000 subscribers will get this drone. It's really cool. You'll get to see some footage of me playing around with it. And yeah, let's go check out Drones Made Easy real quick. That's where we're gonna do some of our tests, and I'll show you what that store is all about. We're down here at Drones Made Easy. This is a local drone store in San Diego. Let's go check it out. This is the Drones Made Easy showroom. They have a variety of drones here, as well as people who can help you out and give you a little bit of feedback on which drone you should buy. They also, if you come over here, have a ton of accessories. So we have some of the Ronins, Osmo Mobile, accessories for your drone. This is definitely a great place to come shop and get everything all in one spot. These guys also have a state-of-the-art repair facility. They are a DJI authorized reseller and do repairs on most of the drones, the consumer drones that you guys would be interested in purchasing. This is the Drones Made Easy Flight Test Center. It's pretty cool because you can come back here, try out different drones, and in addition to that, if you do purchase a drone here, they're actually going to give you a 30-minute one-on-one tutorial on flying your drone. So depending on what level of flying you do, that could be really beneficial if you're a new pilot and just trying to learn some of the controls. Or you may be able to get the chance to learn something new from these guys. These guys are very experienced, so that's a huge benefit to buying here. Today, we're going to come in here and we're going to do our tips and tricks section of this video. A couple things to think about when you're maybe doing some operations where the boat's moving and you're trying to capture a drone. Things like the Volvo Ocean Race require that you have some sort of gloves. These are kind of fancy gloves. A helmet. And potentially some eyewear to protect your eyes. So something to consider for your own safety. And ideally, you'll actually have a person who's flying the drone and a second person who's capturing the drone. I just started up the Phantom 4 Pro and I got a compass calibration issue. So I have to calibrate the compass, and the funny thing is you have to do what I like to call the drone dance. So you guys are about to see it. On here it tells you what you need to do. You have to rotate the drone and you have to change the axes. So you'll see me do it right now. And on the screen over here, it's gonna tell me when it's done on that axis. So now it's telling me to flip it. So I flip it, do the same thing. You wanna try to keep the drone as centered in this turn as possible. Sometimes what you'll end up noticing too is that if you're on something that has some sort of ferrous metal inside it, so cement, for example, has rebar in it, that can really affect your compass signal. So try to get it off of those ferrous materials, which would affect your compass. Okay, before we launch this puppy, let's talk about a couple settings that would be pretty important for you, especially on a boat, to change inside your app. So you'll do this going through your remote. In my case here, I have this is the Crystal Sky remote control. It has remote control with a screen built in. This thing is extremely expensive. For the most part, I wouldn't necessarily suggest this for somebody who's starting out, but there is an advantage of having this. It has a daylight screen, so it's very bright. And also you just have to charge one device. Sometimes iPhones or Androids or whatever, they don't process that well. Your screen will get frozen occasionally or the app will freeze. And so this just sort of reduces the amount of things that could go wrong. In my case, I do this professionally all the time, so that's something I'm trying to reduce as many little obstacles as possible. Anyway, let's get into the app real quick. Okay, so here we are now, we're in the app. In the upper left-hand corner, you can see it says compass error. We need to move the aircraft and calibrate it. That's what my little drone dance is all about. You'll get errors, or if you're in a no-fly zone, that's where all that will show up. But first thing we're going to do is we're going to go up to this right-hand corner where there's these 3 little dots and click on that. Once you get in here, you'll see on the left-hand side at the top, there's a little drone icon. We're going to click on that. And one of the first things you're going to want to do is enable intelligent flight modes. This is going to give you the ability to switch it over into sport mode, or also use some of the auto features. I would not suggest using auto features. I'm not an auto feature kind of guy. I don't trust them. I've had a lot of bad experiences with that. My suggestion is not to use the intelligent flight modes. However, the T, which stands for tripod mode, is actually pretty useful when you're in an environment where you're just doing slow shots and you want to get real nice cinematic looks. Return to home altitude. This is important if you're near buildings. You might want to try to set that so that it will return to home over the top of buildings. It does have an intelligent mode where it will sense that it's going to run into something and it'll try to avoid it. But in any case, if you know you're next to a 100-foot building, then set it to 150 feet. When you guys start out, you might want to try this beginner mode. It's kind of cool. It kind of keeps the drone from getting too far away from you, going too high, etc. On that note of going too high, maximum altitude, the legal flying limit in the United States is 400 feet unless you have a waiver by the FAA to fly above that. So you can set that to 400 feet so that you are not breaking the law. But when we're out at sea, obviously things are a little bit different. You can get a little bit higher. And when I say out at sea, you actually need to be quite a ways away as long as you're not in controlled airspace. Distance limit, that's if you don't want the drone to fly too far away. I keep that off. I've had a bad experience where I was on a trimaran, the distance limit was on, and the trimaran kept going and the drone kind of hit a virtual wall and I couldn't really turn around. Luckily I was able to turn it off in time and still keep signal and then catch up to the trimaran, so that's something to keep in mind. Now let's go into the advanced settings. Alright, now below here you'll see RC signal lost. This is really, really important. So when you're out at sea, and by default this is set to return to home, we do not want the drone to return to home if you're on a boat that's moving, because return to home means it's going to be in the water. There's also an option for landing if it loses signal, which also again we don't want to have happen. So put it in hover. This at least gives you some ability. If you're in a race, you're probably in no luck, but maybe you can recover signal long enough to at least get your drone back. If you're not in a race or you're just out on the water or whatever, it will hover in place so you can turn your boat around and try to get signal again. It will hover until it dies. When it dies, it will actually automatically land, so then you're in big trouble. And then at the bottom here you can see this emergency stop mode. This is also really important because when you go to bring the drone back in and you're going to go land it, you're going to actually have to do whatever you set it to. In my case, I have push sticks to inner or outer corners, and it will automatically shut down the drone. This is also important because if you're flying around and you do this by accident, your drone's going to drop out of the sky, so be careful of that. Now, on the left-hand side of the screen here, let's go to where that dot is with the little squiggly lines. And let's scroll down to the bottom. This is our settings for our sensors on the drone. I try not to really rely on the sensors very much. I mean, there's things like sunlight can affect it actually. A reflection of the sun off the water will cause your drone to just stop in midair because it thinks it's going to hit something, but it's actually just a reflection of the sun off the water. Let's go into the advanced settings. And when you look on here, you see this landing protection. It's by default on. Let's turn it off. And what this is going to do is it's actually going to allow you to be able to land more safely on a boat. And what happens is when this landing protection's on, the last foot or so, the drone takes over and will slowly descend. But the problem with that is if your boat is moving at all and it takes over and the boat moves forward or side to side, it takes over and tries to land based on GPS and will cause your drone to potentially crash into something. So I just shut that off. It also allows you to be able to catch the drone easier. And you can also see down here is the return to home obstacle detection. That's what I was talking about, setting your height and distance. It is useful, I guess. I've never actually had this thing lose connection and then need to use that. I wouldn't rely on it. Like I said, I don't really trust any of the auto features on these things. And while we're in the settings, let's just kind of go through what each of these are. On the side here, you'll see this little thing that looks like a remote. Here's how you can control some of your stuff for your remote control. In here is your image transmission. You know, not much you really should mess around with this. But if you are having some problems with transmission, this might be a place to look and see if you can set something to basically make sure you're not losing signal or if there's some sort of interference. This is much more advanced, so obviously that's for another video. This next one is the aircraft battery. Now here's your gimbal. Okay, this one's sometimes used if you realize that your gimbal's a little bit off of kilter. You can go in here and adjust the gimbal. There's a couple ways to do it. One is an auto calibration that you can do on the ground, but then there's this adjust gimbal. And this is if you kind of realize that it's a little bit off, you can actually go in here and kind of adjust it yourself so that it lines up a little bit better. Okay, now last are the three little dots at the bottom here. Yeah, I mean, you know, this is where you can adjust things like if it's in meters or miles per hour, live streaming platform if you want to stream directly into Facebook or YouTube. Most of the stuff we're not going to really mess with today or talk about because it's not really that important for people just sort of starting out or just using a drone on the boat right now. The last thing I want to go over with you guys is just a couple of the settings with the camera and then this last piece on the menu up here. So if you look up at the top where it says compass error, remove aircraft, and you click on that, that kind of gives us an overall status of the aircraft. This is where you'd go in to calibrate the compass, make sure you have the latest firmware. If it says abnormal here, we can find out why. This says I need to calibrate my vision sensors with the PC or Mac. I'll show you guys how to do that potentially in another video. We can also go down here and change the maximum altitude, and this is another spot where you can format your SD card or your internal memory, and mostly this is just to give you status on the aircraft. If you guys see an IMU calibration error, that this is the place you'd come into to hit that IMU, and you'd have to calibrate it. That's something you really need to do on a stable ground, not really on a moving boat. If that happens, I definitely caution you not to fly your drone because it could potentially flip upside down or lose stability, and that is definitely a major issue, so be careful with that. Back out on this main menu here, you can see over on the right hand side there's a icon above the record button that would switch back and forth between photo mode and video mode. And below the record button are these little lines. Here is where we can get in to control the camera some more. Mine's set to manual here because I really need a lot of control over the camera. I don't want it changing exposure while I'm flying. But when you start out, it's totally fine to use the auto mode. It does a good job. If we scroll over to the next spot across the top here where you see the little camera icon, this is where we can get into the video format size. So right now I'm in 4K. The standard frame rate for film in the United States is 24 frames per second. What you might want to do though is go down to 1080p, and you can see that we have some other options here. So like 60 frames per second will give us some really nice slow-mo. If you do 120 frames per second, it'll get crazy slow-mo. It also punches in on the sensor in order to be able to squeeze out that type of frame rate. I usually leave it in 4K 24. a couple other things in this menu here. You'll see under color, mine's in D-Log. For you guys starting out, I'd just say stick to none, because if you have log, that means you actually have to color grade it. And you know, for the more advanced guys, it's good because we get a little bit more information in the shadows and the highlights, and we can get a wider dynamic range, which again could be explained in a more advanced video. Lastly, if you look here at the top, it says JPEG and RAW. I shoot RAW because I want to have the maximum ability of editing and post, but if you want to get lots of pictures, you would switch over to JPEG, and it still has plenty of ability for editing. It's just that RAW will maximize that. And there's a bunch of other little settings in here. Maybe take some time to sort of play with some of these things, check them out, see what works best for you. And last but not least is the storage location. You can either do internal storage or SD card. This is great if you forget your SD card. Then at the bottom here, you can format the SD card or format the internal storage just like you could in the other menu. So that's it on settings for now. To answer probably one of the main questions of this video, which drone should you buy? First, let's look at what's out there. As you can see in this video, we have big giant drones for industrial purposes. We have some bigger drones that are used for cinema, filmmaking, and then we start getting down into the realm of some of the drones that I would suggest for you guys, which are more the consumer end drones. As you can see in front of me here, I have the Phantom 4 Advanced. This is the MAVIC 2 Zoom and the MAVIC 2 Pro. Of these three drones, I would definitely probably steer you guys in the direction of one of the MAVICs. So the cool thing about the MAVIC is you can see here it is all folded out, and this is what it looks like all folded up. It has a small remote control, and if you're trying to go travel somewhere, this is what holds the little MAVIC, and this is what holds the big Phantom 4 Pro. So that's a big difference, especially if you're on a boat and you're trying to conserve space. The downside to the MAVIC is that it is harder to catch, as you can see in this video. So as you can see, there's a much narrower spot here to catch the drone. Definitely a lot less room for your fingers. And when you're on a moving boat, this is not the most ideal way to try to catch a drone. So when it comes to catching a drone, you can see here with the Phantom 4 in this video how much easier it is to catch. So between these three drones, again, I think probably the best bet is gonna be the Zoom. This is a great drone. It's really cool because with the Zoom feature, you can actually be further away from your subject, which makes for a safer situation. Or if you are somewhere remote and you're trying to kind of zoom in on something and you're flying your drone far away to go do some research on what's on an island or whatever, this just gives you a little bit more in the way of tools to use. If you're trying to get into the business of filmmaking or using a drone for work, this camera definitely is a higher quality camera. This is going to be something that's going to help you land jobs in that sense. But for the most part, I don't really think this is necessary for most people who are just getting started with a drone. And you know, not to leave out the Phantom 4, unfortunately these things are now in limited quantity, so if you are thinking about getting one of these things, I would buy one sooner than later because they are probably going to be off the shelves in the next year or so. This is a great drone. It's definitely my preferred drone out on the ocean, although it does take up more room. It's a slightly heavier drone. It does much better in high winds, and it's much easier and safer to catch compared to these little guys. The last thing I'm going to leave you guys with is some tips on how to actually learn how to use your drone. And I think what I want to sort of instill in your mind is that you have to rewire your brain to be able to be responsive and fly these drones when they're facing the other direction. So one of the best ways to do that is actually to draw figure eights in the sky. As you can see in this video, it's a little sloppy and I was working in a small space, but you'll see what I'm trying to do here. By doing these figure eights, what's happening is you're actually forcing your brain to have to think about the direction of the drone. And what you want to do is you want to keep the front of the drone always facing forward as it's going through the 8. So it's following itself through the figure 8, and this is making you have to use basically all the controls. So once you get your drone and you're just starting out, my suggestion would be go out to an open field somewhere safe, launch the drone, get it up off the ground. Your left stick is your up and down and your rotation. Once the drone's off the ground, don't really mess with that. Actually, just use your right stick, which is forward, backwards, and side to side, and start getting used to how the drone is moving through the sky. Then when you start to get a little bit better, then start doing the figure 8s. And what this will do is it will actually make it so that your brain starts to connect to your thumbs, and you're gonna start being a better pilot by doing this. So then you can start to do more advanced moves as you start getting used to the rotation of the drone. That's the big thing, is the rotation. That one's a really hard one. People freak out. What happens a lot of times is they start to lose control, and then they start flying too far into one direction, and then they slam into a wall or whatever. So that being said, if you do find yourself in a sticky situation and you sort of feel like you're out of control, just let go of the controls. Because unless you're gonna hit somebody, if you just let go of the controls, the drone will actually stop and hover in midair, and it's safe. The other thing is, I wouldn't mess around too much with the up and down at first, because then again, you're asking for some trouble. And lastly, when you do go land the drone, I would suggest that you have the drone oriented where it's the easiest for your brain to basically comprehend. So, for example, if I'm landing on the back of a boat, I'll actually face the camera away from me so that the drone's facing forward, and reverse the drone into me so that the controls are all as they exactly are lined up with the drone. And this will make it safer and easier for you to catch the drone. Hey guys, thanks again for watching this video today. Stay tuned for that giveaway. I will be announcing it in the next couple weeks. Hopefully we get that 1,000 really soon. Tell your friends. There's a good chance that you or your buddies could win. So let's get those subscribers up to 1,000 so we can get this drone off, and I'll work on the next giveaway. If you guys are not a subscriber, subscribe, smash that subscribe button for me. I promise there will be good stuff coming out in the future, lots of stories related to sailing. And again, thanks for watching. Okay, last thing I'm gonna do is demonstrate the little MAVIC Mini, which is the same drone that I'll be giving away at the end of this video. So, without further ado, here we go. It's a pretty cool drone. It's extremely responsive, very stable, and just like its big brother and big sister. I think this is a great drone to learn on if you're just getting started. But I also think, as far as like drones go, this thing has a really good camera and very easy to use. Very small, very portable. Really cool.